Hello again and welcome to another Mordian Glory Warhammer 40k video. In today's episode we shall be doing some more dispatches from the front lines. That's right, it's time for another tournament after action report. And oh boy, do I have a spicy meatball for your viewing pleasure today, because I took a World War I style list into the competitive meta. We had infantry, we had artillery, and we had officers leading gloriously from the back, miles behind the front lines. Everything you need to recreate the Great War in space. And let me tell you, oh baby, it was an absolute blast. One of my favorite tournaments that I've been to in a long time, and I really enjoyed using this style of guard army. And you know what? I'm just too excited. I can't hold back anymore. Let's not mess around. Let's fix bayonets, go over the top, and charge right into today's episode. As is tradition, I want to begin by saying a few thank yous. I want to say a big thank you to Just Play Games for hosting the event. Those of you that have been listening to a few of these tournament reports will notice that I've been going to Just Play a lot recently, and there's a good reason for that. They put on some fantastic tournaments and they do them every single month. So it's just so convenient for me to go down there and know that I've got a good event that I can do videos about, and there's a good community there so I can get on with some fantastic people. So as always, big thanks to Just Play for running the tournament, running it well, and it's just a fantastic venue. If you ever find yourself in the Liverpool area, please consider going along. They've got lots of gaming tables, they've got lots of snacks and drinks so you can keep yourself well hydrated and well fed throughout the day. And of course, they've got a well-stocked shop with all sorts of games. They've got 40k, of course, Age of Sigmar, Old World now, and lots of other things like Star Wars Legion and the Song of Ice and Fire game, and many others. But now let's get into the video proper, and we'll begin with a list overview. Like I said in the intro, I was taking a World War I style list, so there's going to be lots of infantry and artillery. Now I've actually done, as I normally do, a separate video that's already out on the channel that goes into the fine detail of this army, and I'll make sure that there's a link to that down in the description below, so you can go and check that out at your own time and get into all the fine details. But I'll give you a brief overview now. I took 120 line infantry, battle line infantry. This consisted of 4 units of Cadian shock troops, each one with double plasma, double melter gun, double voxcaster, and double sergeant with las pistol and chainsword. I went for the double melter, double plasma because it's a classic loadout, and I know that over many editions that has not let me down. I've got a crap load of melter and plasma in my collection as well, so it's just an easy loadout for me to do. I went for the las pistol chainsword, not for any tactical reasons. I just don't have any autogun or bolt pistol sergeants for my Cadians painted up. Honestly, it makes very little difference. Having a few extra strength 3 shots at range versus having a few extra strength 3 shots in combat, it's fine. So it was a slight inefficiency in the list, but I wanted to make sure my list was as close to WYSIWYG as possible. I then had 2 units of Catachan jungle fighters with their only loadout, frankly, the flamers, the voxcasters, sergeants, that kind of stuff. You might be wondering, or even lambasting me down in the comment section for not including any Death Korps Krieg in my battle line infantry. There's a good reason I didn't do this. Firstly, and probably the most important reason, I've actually got another tournament that I'm going to, which I'm taking a pure Death Korps Krieg army too, or the infantry, again, artillery. I'm even taking triple Malkador in that list too. So I didn't want to have 2 tournament reports that were going to be coming out in close succession, which featured armies that were very similar. I wanted them to be distinctive and also then be able to sort of compare the 2 armies against each other. How does World War I with Death Korps versus World War I without Death Korps work? I also wanted to encapsulate some of the other aspects of World War One, the Great War, when you had things like the Powell's battalions, the masses of fairly well-trained conscripts that took part in things like the Battle of the Somme. This is what my Cadians represent. They don't get to hit on 2s like Krieg do with their Gundamine and take aim, they're hitting on 3s. Also, I wanted to have the Trench Raiders with the Katachans. So I just wanted to represent different kinds of infantry. So yes, you can absolutely lambast me, but like I said, the Death Corps will be getting covered in their own special pure Death Corps of Krieg tournament report. Moving on, I then had the officers to lead all that infantry. I had Strachan for the Katachans. Strachan is a beast, good in close combat. He killed plenty of stuff he kills something every single game this tournament, but most importantly, he does 2 orders. And he's, for 55 points, he is a great source of order efficiency. So I take him for the orders primarily, and then I have fun with him in combat with his Bionic Arm and Devil's Claw. I then have the Creed Command Blob. This is a combo that I've talked about on videos already, and it's where you take Creed, put it in a infantry squad with a platoon command squad, give the platoon command squad Grand Strategist, and you have a unit that can issue 4 orders. So even though I've only got these 2 officer units, the Command Blob and Strachan, I actually have enough orders for all 120 of my line infantry. The last bit of the infantry were the Stormtroopers. I took 3 units of Kazakin, and they all were in Klazakin loadout. So 2 Melter, 2 Plasma Pistol, Power Sword. I had the Hotshot Sniper, I had the Voxcaster, the Melter Mine, all that good stuff. These units were there to represent the Stormtroopers from World War One and the infiltration tactics and all that kind of good stuff. Also, they are elite infantry, which don't need babysitting. They warrior elite themselves, they give themselves orders. So they kind of just are self-contained, flexible toolbox unit. That covers all of the infantry and the officers, but of course, we must get to the artillery. No World War I style list would be complete without it, and I took every artillery piece that I have. I took 3 Basilisks, and I took 2 Manticores. I didn't take any mortars because I wanted to go for big artillery, and I wanted to also really be able to compare these 2 artillery pieces. I've often used Manticores or Basilisks. I have rarely used them all in the same list. The Basilisks and the Manticores were going to bring a lot of firepower, and I was going to be using artillery in a way that I very rarely normally do, which is to actually do concentrated damage. Normally when I run artillery, the point of it is to harass the enemy, kill those little 5-man squads out of line of sight, slow the enemy down, that's it. Now I've got enough artillery where if I concentrate it, I can just blast the crap out of the enemy. Last but certainly not least, we have 2 Cyclops demolition vehicles, and these were just there to outflank and do secondaries. That was it. In total, I had 167 infantry models, including officers and command squads, and then I had 5 artillery pieces and 2 small demolition vehicles. But with all of that covered, now let's get into the lay of the land. What was the format of the event? It was a 3-round, 1-day tournament, a classic RTT event. In terms of the terrain, it's the standard sort of just play affair where they make sure you've got a decent amount of ruins in your deployment zone to hide about 66% of your army if you're running a large one like mine, or most of it if you're running an elite one. They also have big ruins in the center of the board, and then the flanks tend to have cover but not line of sight blocking, so you can go down the middle, which is quicker but also is line of sight blocking, so some of your units might not be able to move through that, or you can go down the flanks, which are great for vehicles but the ground is a bit more open, forces players to make choices. Missions were a bit different this time. Normally they've got a set tournament format, but today they were starting 2024 off with a bit of a curveball, and they went for totally random missions. So it was drawn each time from the deck, and so players had to be able to adapt on the fly. I quite like this style of tournament. Yes, it does mean that you do get some potential imbalances with the missions, but it means you've got to be on your toes, and you've got to build a list that can handle anything. And the last bit to mention is how competitive was the tournament. I would describe it as competitive. Not a Shark Tank, not a fluffy bunny event, straight down the middle, competitive. A lot of the players that were there were fairly experienced. They were regulars of Just Play and these RTTs, so they know the lay of the land, they know what to expect. You also had a handful of players who were maybe a bit more seasoned, a bit more traveled, people who've gone around to multiple tournaments, maybe played in GTs and stuff. And then there was probably like only one or two people that hadn't been to a tournament before, but they did play a lot of 40k. So there was no one there that was turning up with no experience whatsoever. The vast majority of people were experienced at 40k and experienced with RTT style tournaments. And this was reflected in the kind of list that were being brought. So most people were bringing their preferred faction, but the best version of that. So for example, there was only one person who had Eldar there, but there were lots of armies like Death Guard who were very solid. There were several Necrons who were doing quite well right now. There were a couple of Guard players, including myself, one Sisters, a couple of Orcs, that kind of thing. So there were a lot of good players with their preferred army running it in their favorite style, but there were only one or two people that were running the meta. But now let's get into the real reason why you're all here, the games. And in round one, I was paired up against Alex and his Space Wolves. Now, I've actually played against Alex before at Just Play in a tournament, and it was a really brutal game. And I knew that his preferred playstyle was fast and aggressive. Last time I played him with Space Wolves, he was just getting into the faction, and he was running them as Sons of Rus. This time, his list was vastly improved, and you could tell that he'd got some practice in with it as well. His entire army was in a Stormlands detachment. This means that they can advance and charge. So they're going to get across the board very quickly and start getting into my face early on. In his list, he had two big units of Thunderwolf cavalry, each one led by a battle leader on Thunderwolf. There was then a big unit of assault intercessors with jump packs, and they were led by a chaplain. And then there was a big unit of Blood Claws led by Ragnar, and they were in a Rhino. On top of this, there were three of the Space Wolf Dreadnoughts. Two of them were with Axe and the Shields, and one of them was Bjorn the Fell-Handed. There was then, I think it was two, but it may have been three units of Hounds of Morkai, and there was also a unit of Scouts, and there was a unit of Longfangs. And finally, there was one unit of Fenrisian Wolves and a Lone Op Lieutenant. The mission for round one was priority targets. So you hold 1 to 2 objectives throughout the game, and then at the end, you want to try and hold 3 to get maximum points. The twist was supply lines. So you need to hold your home objective, and on 4+, you will get that extra CP. And finally, the deployment type was Hammer and Anvil. This was a good thing for me because I always feel like Hammer and Anvil, the armies are a bit further apart. It means that whilst Alex can advance and charge, I'm guaranteed to be able to have at least one turn of shooting him before he gets to charge me down. Speaking of deployment, I went in a very traditional classic guard formation, the 3 lines. This is where I put my Katachans up front. Then behind that, I had the Cadian Shock troops. And then behind that, I had my Kazakin and my artillery. The idea behind this deployment is the Space Wolves can come charging in. They break in, they destroy the first line, but there's another line behind. That line shoots the crap out of what has first charged in. Then the Space Wolves will come in again, destroy most of the second line, but hopefully be pretty badly damaged. At this point, between my reinforcements and the scraplets that should be left over, that second line should hold quite well. I get to shoot the crap out of him again, and it just helps really just speed bump and slow down assault armies that are trying to get to your artillery and your viable damage dealers. So hopefully this traditional anti-assault army tactic will be able to play out against the Space Wolves with their fancy new detachment. As for the Space Wolves, they went Billy Big Bollocks. They put all of their units pretty much on the line, ready to rock and roll. Now, normally this would be a complete suicide mission. Doing that against Guard when I've got tanks like Dawns and Lehman Russes, you're just tempting fate for me to get turn 1 and to delete half your army. but I didn't have Dawns. I didn't have Leman Russes. The majority of my firepower was coming from infantry, and my infantry have only really got, well, their best range is 12 inches. That's when the melter guns start kicking in. That's when the rapid fire starts kicking in. I can do some shots over that, but it's a lot less. And there's no point in trying to hide from my artillery because that can shoot indirect. So actually deploying on the line in this case was very brazen, but it was totally the right move to do. Both players took tactical objectives, and then it was time to find out who was going to get the first turn. And in typical Mordian Glory style, I don't get the first turn against the assault army. I'm telling you, I just never ever go first at tournaments. If you've watched any of the tournament reports before, you will know that I have to deploy assuming I'm going to go second, because I pretty much go second every single time. In all the tournaments I've been to in 10th edition, probably maybe just over one hand I can count on how many times I've been first. Even when I've been to like GTs and stuff, I've gone like 4 games in a row and not gone first. It's just crazy. So I had expected this, so I had deployed in such a manner that Alex wouldn't be able to get a turn 1 charge on me, even with a good advance and whatnot. He would have had to get like a 5 or a 6 on each advance in order to be able to do that. As it turned out, Alex did move and advance everything straight at me, but he wasn't able to get a turn 1 charge. To give you an idea of where his units ended up at the end of turn 1, from my perspective, the right flank, there was a unit of Thunderwolves, and Battle Leader and Bjorn was there as well. In the middle, we had the Scouts, Hounds of Morkai pushing forward. On the left flank, we had another Thunderwolf unit and the Dreadnoughts and Longfangs pushing up there. Alex kept his Bloodclaws in Rhino back, and he kept his Assault Marines, Assault Intercessors back as well. This was actually a very clever move again, because the worst thing that he can do is go all in and just give me so many targets that I can just shoot everything. With Guard, it's very difficult to threat overload Guard because we've got a lot of guns. So what he did is he went forward with a lot of stuff, made sure that he could hide the majority of it using a lot of the terrain in the middle. And then when he knew that I was going to come forward and start trying to play for those middle objectives, he had those units not in strategic reserve, but on sort of in reserve on the tabletop, so that when I came forward, he can jump on me and counter push me and make it even harder for me to get onto those middle objectives. But that was it for turn 1 Space Wolves. No damage done, but they are comfortably on the 3 middle objectives. I knew I wasn't going to get to those objectives early on. I just needed to try and aim for a turn 4, turn 5 kind of win. This is what I always have to do when I face these assault armies. I pushed forward with my Catachans. I moved them and I advanced them and I spread them out so that they are move blocking the Thunderwolves. I know that even if my shooting doesn't go to plan, that they, because they're cavalry, they can't go through walls, won't be able to get to my valuable infantry behind, my Cadians and my Kazakans. So pretty much everything moves forward. The Catachans go really far forward and everyone else just moves forward normally and receives take aim. We then get to the shooting phase, and I start off by doing Creed's trick where I use the mortar and then I can do 3 fields of fire, and I put that on one of the Thunderwolf units. That all goes fine. I then shoot my first Basilisk at that Thunderwolf unit, and Alex plays a stratagem which makes them -1 to hit, -1 to wound. This was a really good play because I've already put fields of fire on that unit. So now if I want to take advantage of that stratagem, I'm going to need to hit a lot worse. I think about what I want to do here because I obviously have lined up to do that. And I go, you know what? I'm just going to switch target. And so all of my artillery, pretty much every last artillery piece I have, goes into the other Thunderwolf unit, which hasn't got any buffs on it. I don't need the extra AP for my artillery anyway, because I'm AP -2. I go down to AP -1 essentially with cover, but he's got a 4 invulnerable save. So it was really, the fields of fire was for my small arms. So I just concentrate all my firepower on the other side and just use my artillery to utterly delete that second Thunderwolf unit. I wipe it out to a man. I think maybe the battle leader survived on a wound or 2, but yeah, the main threat, the bulk of it, which is those Thunderwolves, were taken care of. And really, that was my turn. In terms of objectives, I had struggled somewhat, and Alex had drawn 2 good ones. So we both had tactical. He got extend battle lines, which naturally he did, and then he got engage on all fronts, which he got for 3 as well. So he's got loads in terms of secondary on turn 1. I drew no prisoners, and I only managed to wipe out because I couldn't quite get that battle leader. I only wiped out 1 unit, so I only get 2 points for no prisoners in my turn 1. So he's in a great position for primary, and he's storming ahead on secondary as well. We then get into battle round 2, and the Space Wolves start off with crunch time. The Thunderwolves on the right come flying into the Catachans and almost obliterate them. They actually don't quite wipe them out, which is a bit of a problem for me because I was hoping that they would die and then I could use reinforcements on them. We then get to the other flank, and because the Space Wolf cavalry is gone, their ability to charge in and wipe out the other Catachan unit is basically non-existent. And so they actually don't manage to get into combat on that other flank. Just don't quite manage it. The Space Wolf Dreadnoughts are struggling to go around the terrain, and Alex doesn't really fancy throwing like 5 Hounds of Morkai against like 20 Catachans led by Strachan. So he just sort of goes, you know what, I'll just move far forward as I can, but I'm not going to throw away my assets. A few charges are attempted on the Dreadnought stuff, but you know, they can't quite make it. However, the big news is that the Long Fangs managed to draw a bead on one of my Basilisks because they get into a bit of terrain and they are able to do a good volley into it, and they almost destroy it. This is obviously a big deal for me because my artillery is doing some heavy lifting for me, so those Long Fangs are a real problem that I'm going to have to deal with. But that really is it for Space Wolf's turn. They've made contact on one side, done a good bit of damage. They've not quite got into contact on the other side, but that's fine because they're going to be able to get there on turn 3. Also, their points are storming ahead. They get 10 points on primary, and then Alex had drawn Aerodynam, which he instantly got for 5, and he controls all the middle objectives as well, so he got Cleanse for max points as well. So I'm really far behind on points by the end of turn 2. It then comes over to guard turn 2, and I'm like, okay, now it's my turn. I've been hit hard, but not as hard as it could have been, and it's time for me to hit back even harder. On the right side with the Thunderwolves, I actually stay still. I fall back with my Catachans, and I fall them back towards the objective because I think, hell, I might be able to do something with them over there. They might be able to take the objective later. If they die, they die. It doesn't really matter. I then, like I said, stay still with all the other infantry, and this means that I can get lethal hits, and I could use my infantry firepower to really hammer those Thunderwolves. My artillery can go and support them as well. Also, there's a bunch of Dreadnoughts that are milling around in the center. I might be able to get some shots off on them. I open up my shooting phase with the mortar from Creed. Now, I know that he can do his -1 to hit, -1 to wound stratagem, but I really want to get rid of these guys. I've got take aim on most of my infantry, so yes, I'll be hitting on 4s, but I'll have lethal hits, so it's all good. I fire the mortar, resolve everything, and then Alex goes, okay, I'm going to use, I think it's an enhancement, which allows me to do a surge move, and I have to go towards the nearest enemy unit. I'm like, oh. He goes, yeah, I went over this in my army overview, and I was like, ah, right, I totally forgot you had that. Well, fair play. I guess there's not much I can do about it. That really throws a spanner in my works and my plans, but hey, it's your rules, it's your enhancement, go for it. So he surges, and this allows him to get into contact with the 2 Catachans that were the survivors. Now, this is a really big deal because now I can't shoot them, and all of my infantry on the right side that stays still has wasted its entire turn. I didn't move them, and they've got very few other targets, maybe some long range shots here and there, but very few other targets. Had I known, should I say, had I remembered that enhancement, I definitely would have moved my Catachans the other way, and this meant that he wouldn't have been able to surge move into my infantry. But it is what it is. It's an enhancement. I had been told about it. I had forgotten about it. So there we go. And I'm like, all right, this is, you know, not ideal, but it's all right because I've got a unit of Cadians that are nearby. It's like a 7 or 8 inch charge. I can charge them in and I can tie them down. Sure, I'm probably going to lose most of the blob, but it's all right because I'll be able to make sure those Space Wolves aren't able to get into my main lines with if they're having to sit there chomping through infantry because I've tied them up. We move over to the rest of the shooting, and because I can't target the Thunderwolves, I start just bombarding the crap out of everything else. The Assault Intercessors that were sort of sneaking around at the back waiting for me to come forward, they get hit hard, and about half of them are wiped out by a Basilisk and a Manticore. I then go after the Hounds of Morkai in the center, wipe them out, and I also managed to do some damage to the scouts, killing a couple of them, and I'm able to do some damage to the other Hounds of Morkai unit, and I actually managed to charge in and finish those guys off in combat. Strachan killed 4 Hounds of Morkai. 1 had been killed, 4 Hounds of Morkai got killed by Strachan, and there was some scattered damage done here and there against like Dreadnoughts and whatnot. It then comes over to the charge phase, and I charge into the Thunderwolves. I make the charge. A lot of my guardsmen do die, but fortunately I am able to cling on with, about 5 or 6 Cadians, and that's pretty good. So I'm like, yes, got him locked down there. Or so I thought, because it turns out that these bloody Thunderwolves can fall back and charge. And so in Alex's turn, he just goes, okay, I'm going to fall back towards you. And I'm like, oh, I'm surprised you do that. I thought you would stay in combat and finish them off. And he goes, well, I can fall back and charge. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. And he was like, yeah, I went over it in my army. This is what, in my army overview at the beginning, this is what I can do. And I was like, right. Yeah, all right, I guess. Now, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be real with you boys. I was kind of frustrated. First, I forgot the surge move. Secondly, I forgot that he could fall back and charge. And I had been playing with a bit of an open hand, and I felt like it was a little bit of a gotcha. Okay, I maybe I was wrong, and I'd love for you guys to know what you think down in the comment section. Complete transparency, Alex had told me clearly about these things in the game, and I should have been paying more attention. Of course, but I had also said, I'm going to literally out loud, it's okay, I'll charge in and tie you up. It's okay, I'm going to fall back this way because then I'm going to shoot you. I had said these things, so is it a gotcha, is it not? Chat, you decide down below. Do you need to tell your opponent everything that they do? Everything that your army can do? Or if you've told them once, that's it, you've warned them. Fair play. I think there's arguments with both sides, but I tell you what, I realized at this point that we were playing a competitive game. And fair play, like, this is a tournament. Tournaments, you play to win. We're not playing at home, beer and pretzels, all that kind of stuff. But a little switch in my head did go from casual to competitive. And I thought to myself, all right, game on. I didn't get salty with Alex. I didn't change my demeanor. I was just like, right, that's what we're doing. We're playing hardcore. I can fucking play hardcore. In fact, sometimes it can be very nice and enjoyable to play a hard game of 40k. Both sides doing everything they can to bring home the gold. But I just want to make a really important point here before anyone puts any horrible comments down in the comment section. There was no bad blood or ill feeling between Alex and myself in this game. He was very fair-minded, and when it comes to being competitive, he was on the level. So to give you an example, at the beginning of the game, when we're going through the app and we're setting everything up, he points out, I've not got this scout unit painted. Everything else in my army is beautifully painted, but this unit isn't painted, so I'm not claiming battle ready. And that's that's very, very fair, because I wouldn't have been that bothered. I would have been like, are you claiming battle ready or not? And he could have been like, oh, go on, yeah, I mean, it's only the one unit. And I was like, yeah, it's only one unit, and I've done that before. But he went, no, I'm not going to claim battle ready here. And then he did explain in detail everything that his army list could do at the beginning of the game. So I just want to be clear, there's no ill feelings here, and I had a great game, a great experience. And hey, I'm never going to make those 2 mistakes ever again. And sometimes you need to have that experience so that you can learn from it and take it forward. But now let's get back to the game. The pesky Thunderwolves charge in to the remnants of the failing tying up Cadians, the ones that are charged in my turn, and into another Cadian unit. They wipe out the remnants and they reduce the other blob down to just 1 guy. So they get a good amount of attacks going through there. I think there was a CP spent for like a land stratagem, which was kind of cool. And then on the other side, my Kachans are utterly obliterated. Strachan dies. Yeah, so I lose essentially, and obviously I lost the Kachans in my turn because they've been wrapped up by the Thunderwolves with their surge move. So by the end of my turn 2 and the end of Space Wolf turn 3, I had lost both units of Kachans and a unit of Cadians, and another unit been reduced down to just 1 guy. But I was able to bring back 2 of those units because I brought back the Kachans in my turn when they died, and then at the end of the Space Wolf turn, obviously I was able to bring back the other Cadians that had charged in and got finished off by the Space Wolves in their turn. So when all was said and done, I had lost a Kachan unit permanently. I'd lost Strachan permanently. I had another Cadian unit reduced down to 1 guy, but I do have 2 lots of reinforcements coming in going into my turn 3. And the big thing here is that Alex made a couple of mistakes. At the beginning of his turn, he drew his objective cards, and for the first time, he got some bad ones. He got Storm Hostile Objective, and he got Deploy Teleport to Homer. Now, he said, right, he pulled Storm Hostile Objective and went, oh, I can't do that because I hold all the middle ones. The only one I can do is get your home one. I'm probably not going to get there, so I'll probably redraw that one with the CP. And he puts it to one side, and then he drew his second card, which was Deploy Teleport to Homer, and he could do that one in the middle, and he puts that card to one side. And then he gets on with the rest of his turn, and we get to the very end of turn 3, and he goes, okay, what with my secondaries again? Picks up his cards, and he goes, oh, I wanted to trade Storm Hostile in, and I've forgotten to declare that I'm doing Teleport to Homer. Now, normally, I would say, of course, mate, go for it. Redraw that card, spend your CP. That lieutenant's in the middle of the board. He can do the Teleport to Homer. But I was playing competitive now. That was the game we were playing. So I just said, oh, man, it sucks when you forget that kind of stuff. And I looked at Alex, and I gave him a cheeky smile, and like I said, this gives you an example of how there was no bad blood. And he gives me a little smile back, because he knows what's going on here. And so we have a little bit of a chuckle, and I just say to him, look, I forgot a couple of things. You've forgotten a couple of things. That probably balances everything out. And he's like, yeah, fair play. I'll bin off Storm Hostile at the end. At least I'll get a CP for it. And I guess I'll have to do Deploy Teleport to Homer next turn. But unfortunately for the Sons of Russ, there was not going to be a next turn for them. Because Space Wolves are in my face across the line. And I am able to bring almost the full might of my list to bear. My reinforcements come in and steady the line. And I actually bring some in on a flank in the deployment zone because I want to get some of my like investigate signals and whatnot. And everything else just moves forward into point blank range and unleashes hell. In the first couple of turns, Alex's fort saves on his invulnerables and stuff had been good. Turn 3, his dice abandon him. They go as chilly as the snow on Fenris itself. And the Thunderwolves just go down like a sack of shit. The infantry use plasma guns, melter guns, las guns, hotshot snipers, sharp knives, sticks, electronic ball breakers. And that whole Thunderwolf unit just disappears without any of my artillery needing to do anything. And they basically die to a 20-man Cadian blob and 2 Kazakin squads. And like, I'm point blank. I'm right in his face. I'm like chucking melter mines and shit at him and everything. It then goes over to the other flank, and I've got Katachans which have come in, and I've got Cadians and a Kazakin unit which is moving up there as well. And the Kazakin blow apart 1 dreadnought without even... and that's not true. The artillery comes in, blows apart both dreadnoughts, and then the Kazakin get right into the face of the assault intercessors that had jumped forward in the Space Wolf turn 3, blow them to pieces. The Cadians come in, and they're able to do a lot of damage as well, like clearing up, like most of the Long Fangs die. Then the Katachans make their long charge, the night charge, into the Long Fangs, kill them. And then by the time everything's done, both dreadnoughts are down. All the Thunderwolf cavalry, Battlewolf leaders are gone. All the Hounds of Morkai are gone. The Long Fangs are gone. They had blown up a Basilisk in their turn 3, I should mention. And all that was left was... And I even charged in with some units in the center as well. And so all that was... And they were charging against like scouts and whatnot. And so all that was left by the end of my turn 3 was Ragnar with like 3 Blood Claws and a Rhino and the Fenrisian Wolves. And there might have been like 1 or 2 spare Marines here and there, but basically nothing. And it was just brutal. It was an unrelenting display of firepower. And it was glorious. Glorious! And I absolutely needed it. In all fairness, I absolutely needed that turn, because if I hadn't achieved that was more damage than I expected to do. Like, I have to be clear, my dice were a little hot, Alex's dice were a little cold, well, very cold, and that's sometimes all it takes to turn a game around. And I needed that after the big mistakes that I'd made in the in that turn 2. And so basically the game was ended on turn 3. We do play out the last couple of turns, but we just basically talk them out, and Space Wolves end up getting completely tabled. And the Guard end up with a 95 to 58 victory point win. A big, big win. But bear in mind, if Alex had been fully painted, it would have been 95 to 68 points. So with one glorious victory for the Emperor's true finest, his Imperial Guard, under my belt, it was time to go straight into game number 2. No rest for the righteous. And this was again going to be against a fast-moving assault army, but this time of the Xenos variety, because I was taking on Lewis and his orcs. Lewis had a beautifully painted orc army and a really scary list. I took one look at this and went, whew, this is going to be a bloodbath. 3 large units of Squig Hog boys, one of which was being led by a boss knob on a big Squig Hog thing as well. We then had Mozrog on his giant squig, and we had another beast boss on a giant squig as well. There was a unit of Beast Dagger boys in a truck, big unit of Flash Gits with Badrook in a truck, 2 Mega Knobs in a truck. I actually realized you could take Mega Knobs in squads of 2. 60 points for those 2 bad boys. It's actually quite a nice little, almost like one-shot missile that you can just launch at people. There were 2 units of Gretchen, and there were a couple of units of Storm Boys. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3, but there were a few units of Storm Boys knocking around the place as well. The mission that we were playing was the Ritual, which is a bit of an interesting one. There's only one objective in No Man's Land in the center, and you have to go up to it and then do an action, and then you get to place another objective down that's near the middle one. So you kind of start off with less objectives, but you can start spawning more of them in as you complete the Ritual in the middle of the map. The twist was delayed reserves, which can be a really, really big deal, especially for certain armies like Grey Knights and whatnot. But fortunately, in our game, it made no difference whatsoever, because we both deployed everything on the line, on the board, no problems whatsoever. Okay, that's not entirely true. One exception is I did have my Cyclops in reserve, but they were just not going to come until turn 3. I was fine with that. Speaking of deployment, though, it was table quarters, which is search and destroy. And then speaking of deployment again, when it came down to placing our units, my deployment was basically the same as I had done against the Space Wolves, using the 3 lines. I had my Catachans quite far forward. I could use the scout move defensively to go backwards if I wanted to. I was aware that the Orcs can advance and charge and on the wall and all that kind of good stuff. And Lewis basically put everything on the line as well, although he did take advantage of some of the lines like blocking terrain. But again, he could tell that I didn't have a lot of long-range firepower that would get to him apart from my artillery. So going on the line in this matchup is totally okay. It means you don't have to try and go around as much terrain. You can just go straight at each other. We then roll off to see who gets the first turn. Once again, I would really quite like the first turn against a fast assault army like this, for me to be able to just take all of my artillery and bombard one of the squig units, just get rid of it, just from the beginning, would be awesome. But naturally, I don't go first. I roll a big fat stinky 1, and Lewis gets the first turn, and the Orcs cometh. They barrel forward, but Lewis does not call the war. He wants to save that for turn 2, when he can have the fire up inbound. When he's in my face, it makes me much harder to get rid of it. Again, I don't have many battle tanks and whatnot, so just he's going to be on a 4-up save or 5-up save against a lot of my indirect fire stuff as well. So he doesn't need the Wild City. He's going to need it when the melter guns start coming to play, when he's getting very, very close. So Noir barrels forward, goes a long way, but there's no initial charges because, again, I've pre-measured. I've used my scout moves defensively so that I'm guaranteeing he cannot get a charge on me turn 1. But just like the Space Wolves, I have now essentially lost the middle ground, which with the ritual, obviously, it's a bit of a problem because you want the middle ground so you can start getting some more objectives in there. But it comes over to the guard turn 1, and upon sight of the enemy, I advance, sir. That's my style, sir. And my Catachans, they do their thing. One unit moves and advances and goes forward, screens out my left flank, and also gets within range of the center objective, so that they don't advance, sorry, they just move, and they get within 9 inches of the center objective so that they are able to do the ritual and get an objective down. I then take Strachan's unit, which moves and moves but does not advance, and they get into the center. They're ready to, they're not doing an action though. They're going to do a charge. Strachan's got the blood of Hounds of Morkai on his blade. Now he's got a taste for some orc. He wants to cut some orcs down. As for the rest of my movement, my guard infantry moves forward, but make sure that there's at least a 5-inch gap between them and the Catachans of the rank in front, because I don't want the orcs to be able to charge, blast apart the, blast through the Catachans, they consolidate into a new unit. So I've got a nice anti-consolidation zone between my two lines. Goes over to shooting. A lot of my shooting is long range. There's not many melter guns. It's mostly like a dozen or so lasgun shots and a couple of plasma shots coming out of each squad. This does do a bit of damage. I'm able to whittle down and do a bit of damage to a couple of the Squig Hog Boy units. The big thing I'm doing is, which is my infantry first, I'm trying to get that -1 to wound stratagem out, so I know where it is. And Lewis does use it when a unit of my Kazakin start putting some, hitting on 2s, plasma, sniper rifles and stuff on him. So he does play it then. And so at that point, I basically ignore. That was in the unit in the middle, I think it was. And at that point, I basically ignore them. Might not be the unit, might be one unit. But anyway, it's not one unit. It's fine. I basically ignore that unit from that point, and I start slamming a lot of wounds and artillery into the other Squig Hog Boys. And by the time that the dust has settled, one Squig Hog unit is basically wiped out. There's like 3 left, one of which is wounded. And there's another Squig Hog Boy unit, which is also taken down to just 3 models. And there's some damage that's done to various trucks and stuff as well. My turn 1, I charge the combat phase, I should say. I charge the Strachan into Squig Hog Boys, and Strachan, the Catachans go first. They kill the injured one, and then Strachan goes next, and between the rerolls to hit, rerolls to wounds, lethal hits, he just slams through, and he's AP -3 now, he just slams through those 2 remaining Squidcog boys and wipes them out. So Strachan has now killed 4 or 5 Space Marines, and he's killed 2 Squigs during the tournament. We go over to the Orc turn 2, and both sides are fairly similar in terms of points. I hadn't been able to get either one of my secondaries at the beginning, but Lewis Lurley managed to get 3 for engagement on front. So we're fairly equals, and I have taken him off the middle objective because I've got like 20 catachans on it now. The Orcs, though, it's go time, and it's go time in a big way. Mozrog and the other beast boss come round and engage 1 unit of catachans and basically take them down to like 7 models. The catachans in the middle get the crap shot out of them by the flash gets in the truck, and then they get charged by the beast boys that got out of the truck and by some storm boys, and they are unfortunately wiped out to a man. Strachan goes down, but he does go down permanently, but his catachans do come back as reinforcements. And really that's the Orc turn. They come flying in, they wipe out basically my entire front screen. There's some Storm Boys and Gretchen and the Mega Knobs do like investigate signals, so they are off on the flanks a little bit, which is useful to me because it means I'm not getting completely pressured and overwhelmed in one place. And one of the Squighog units, it had gone the long way around because it was trying to use cover to avoid like being shot at, so it doesn't actually get into the game turn 2. If it had come at me directly, it probably would have done, but all it would have slammed into was the catachans, and they all died pretty much anyway, so it wasn't a big deal. Just meant that I had to worry about them in my turn 3, and they were actually a little bit far away, so I wasn't going to be able to get my shots off and wipe them out unless I used my artillery on them. It comes over to guard turn 2, and we have a pretty good turn 2. It's not as devastating as it was in the first game, like when I had that turn 3 versus the Spaceballs, where I just basically tabled them in one turn of shooting. It was a very hefty blow, very hefty, but it wasn't a completely game-breaking blow. So Mozrog doesn't take any damage, but the other beast boss gets reduced down to 2 wounds because I've got 2 Kazakin units which can basically get up close and personal, throw some melter mines on him, and then also shoot him with the melter guns and all that kind of good stuff. So he takes a lot of damage, but he does go down to 2 wounds. The Beast Boys, I get to bring my catachans in from Strategic Reserve. I pass a delayed reserve test, that's not a problem. And the Beast Boys go down from like all the Flamers and the Catachan Lasguns, and then I've got 2 units of Cadians who are facing them down, so they go down to those as well. And then the Squighog Boys, the remaining sort of 3 that had come charging in, they go down to another unit of Cadians. So I wipe all of that out. And one of the Storm Boys, there's 3 Storm Boy units, and one of them just gets flattened by by some of my artillery. My artillery is being used to help out here and there as well, like help out finish the Beastie Boys off, the Squighog Boys off, and I'm also put a couple of artillery pieces into the Squighog Boys at the top, who are taking a bit of a time to come down, because I want to try and whittle them to the point when even if they do hit me, they won't be able to blast through a squad in one go, and then I'll be able to finish them off. Orc turn 3 is pretty quick. There's not a lot of stuff whilst there's a lot of left over, there's not a lot that's actually in the middle. So a unit of Storm Boys comes flying into the Catachans and does some damage to them. The ones that come back as reinforcements, but don't wipe them out. The Flash Gits jump out of their wagon and hose down one of my Kazakin units and wipe them out, and so I bring them back as reinforcements. And really, that was kind of it in sort of the middle and the right flank. In the north, the Squighog Boys come barreling down, but they don't make the charge, and the Mega Knobs begin slowly walking over towards me, but they also aren't in a position to get to me. The real thing was Mozrog and his mate. Mozrog's mate finished off the remaining Catachans in combat. I had the CP, so I think I had CP to reinforcement them. I can't remember, but I think I had the CP to reinforcement them. And then I had... So I don't think I've used it up until this point. Or maybe I have done. No, I don't think I did the CP for it because I used it on the Kazakin instead. So the 20 Catachans, they do go away. And then Mosrog goes into Acadians and starts mauling them, but he hasn't got enough attacks on his own to blast through them. It then comes over to my turn 3, and the TO says, you guys have got like 10 minutes to wrap the game up. We're having a bit of a hard dice down. So I have to have a very quick turn 3, but fortunately, I do what I need to do. I finish off the 2-wound beast boss on Squig. I finish off both Stormboy units, and I completely flattered the Flash Gits with a concentrated artillery barrage. And the Mega Knobs get taken out by a unit of Cadians that was on that flank. And so by the time my turn 3 comes around, the only thing that the Orcs have got left are 3 trucks, Mosrog, and 20 Grots that are hitting on the, hiding on the backfield objective. So we have to, we say we're going to talk out turn 4. The TO comes over and says, you've got to put your scores in now. And I'm like, okay, can we just have 60 seconds just to talk it out? And he goes, you've got literally 60 seconds. It's a hard dice down. So he goes around and checks everyone else's score, gives 6 seconds. We quickly talk out turn 4. And the TO comes back over and says, right, you have got to put your score in now wherever it stands. And I'm like, okay. Fair enough. So the score ends up being 75 to the Orcs and 73 to the Guard. But because so obviously that would be a loss on the normal 40k, but because we're playing WTC scoring, there has to be a 5-point difference in order to have a clear victor. So under the tournament rules, it is a straight draw. And that's absolutely fine by me because I had an amazing game with Lewis. It was a ton of fun. We were very similar. We had lots of backsies, lots of, because he's not played, I don't think he'd played Guard before in 10th. So I, make sure I played with a very open hand. He obviously was being very nice to me and said, I can do the stratagem here. I'm going to be able to advance the charge here and everything. So we had a very open game. We had spent a lot of time chatting. It was a very, very fun game. And so walking away with a draw where both sides can have have the head held high is the perfect outcome. Realistically, just honestly, and I don't want to say this to take anything away from Lewis at all, but it would have been a clear Guard victory if we had had turn 5. The only reason I'm mentioning this is not to wank myself off and give myself a big head. I'm mentioning it so you guys know how this list would perform if it had got to that turn 5. And that was because Lewis was completely tabled. And I think Mosrog might have still been alive, but that would have been it up by the end of turn 4. So turn 5, I would have had a free range just to go where I want and do what I want. If I was to have a tiny criticism, the round timings at Just Play used to be 3 hours, and they've gone down to 2 hours 45 minutes now. Had we had that last 15 minutes, we would have easily, probably without even having to talk it out, got to turn 5, no problems. So I think I definitely felt the tightness of the timings, and I think if I was to give a tiny bit of constructive criticism and just air my own personal preference, I think 3-round timings are essential because there were a number of players that some players were finishing with plenty of time, but I would say that the majority of players were struggling with the 2 hour 45 time limit for sure. But with all of my excuses out of the way, now let's get into game number 3. So we've got one big victory under our belt, one draw there as well, but now it's time to go into game number 3. And I have to say that I was feeling pretty cool, casual about game 3 because I've got a win and a draw under my belt. So even if I lose game 3, I'm going to come out of this with a nice win-loss ratio. I'm going to, even if I go 1-1-1, that's absolutely fine by me. As long as I'm getting some decent wins or having a good time, that's all that matters. And in this tournament so far, I've had a really nice, decent win in a competitive game, and I've had a cool draw against a fantastic opponent. So whatever happens turn 3, game 3 I should say, the pressure's off. But we get to the pairings, and I am going against another Guard player. It's going to be some hot guard-on-guard action pay-per-view, and I am facing off against Morpheus and his Cadians. Morpheus is actually the resident guard player at Just Play. He's been going there longer than I have, and so it was a fantastic way to end the day, to be able to play a game against a fellow guard player, and also against someone who is a big part of the Just Play community. Also, Morpheus follows the channel and he joins the stream and he's supported with super chats and all that kind of amazing stuff. So it was just great to be able to meet not only a fellow guard player, not only a big part of the community, but also a supporter of the channel. It's also really nice being able to play a game where I know exactly what his army does and he knows exactly what my army does. So even though we're both running guard with big armies, the game went super quickly. We got to the end of game turn 5, no problems, with about 20-30 minutes to spare, and it was without rushing. We just really got into it. And so this is a little bit of a, I know we're jumping ahead slightly here, but it is a bit of a, it kind of shows how quick games for 40k can be if you just cut out all the having to explain what each of what your army does. Obviously you need to explain because you don't want to have situations where people get caught out, but maybe it just kind of shows, maybe there's a conversation to be had there about the game being a little complicated. I know they've tried to simplify it, but maybe there's still a lot that can be done to streamline all the bureaucracy and the administratum that is around the game. But that's by the by. Let's get back into the game. And in terms of what was in Morpheus's list, he had an army that was very different to mine. I had lots of infantry, I had lots of quantity, he had quality. So let's just start off with the big boy, the Storm Sword. Storm Sword is a big guard super heavy and one of the best super heavies in the game. Recently someone took one to LVO and they came like third with it or something crazy. I can't remember if it was like third, if it was like seventh or something, but they did very, very, very well using a Storm Sword at a super major event. I've been saying for a long time that the guard super heavies are a bit of a sleeper, a bit of a hidden gem. The only thing that's holding them back is the terrain. But Just Play, one of the reasons I love it is that they have just the right amount of terrain. Super heavies have at least one or two pathways where they can move around and get some shots off. They're not stuck in a deployment zone like you often found like WTC and UKTC. So there's a Storm Sword there. That was a big deal. I was not going to be able to deal with that. It had a tech free supporting it, so it's got a 4-pin vulnerable save. I'm just, you know, like that's just an impossible target for me to get to. Maybe if I'm lucky and I can get like 3 melter mines on it and some other melter guns, but I know that and completely bombard with my artillery, but I know that's not a good unit for me to be facing off against. But then it gets worse because he also had a Praetor. Absolute Chad maneuver, big dick swinging Praetor heavy launcher, which again was a really difficult target for me to deal with because my artillery, even when all massed up, is really going to struggle to deal with that artillery. But that doesn't go back the other way because it's got like anti-vehicle missiles that it can fire indirect and it can hit on 2s and all this kind of stuff with its ability. So yeah, he massively out-vehicled me, massively out-firepowered me, massively out-artilleried me. And then it keeps getting worse because then he had a Liam Rust Eradicator and a Liam Rust Demolisher and a unit of 3 Armor Sentinels. So in terms of firepower, I was in a not in a great spot. Not ideal, to say the least. But in terms of infantry, I was doing much better because Morpheus only had 4 units of Cadians. One of those was being used to create a Supreme Command Blob, so that's kind of not really on the line. That's kind of at the back. And one of them was being used with Creed. So he has the firepower advantage in a big way. And I'd been actually playing next to Morpheus in game 2, and I had seen the firepower that his list could bring to bear. And although I think he lost his game number 2, he did absolutely smash the Eldar. Like there was not much Eldar stuff left, and the Eldar player had won very very well, of course, had won on points. But, when the Avatar of Cain is getting blown off the table in one turn by things like the Storm Sword, you know that the guard's bringing the firepower. And I'd seen this happen, so I knew what to expect. And I obviously play guard, so I knew what this thing could do. So he's got the firepower advantage. We're pretty equal on artillery. I've got more, but his is good. His is very good. But I have a huge advantage in terms of objective control. Going over to mission and deployment and all that good stuff, we were playing Deploy Servo Skulls, which is an interesting one. We'll get into that a little bit more. And then we were using Scrambler Fields for the twist. Fortunately, that didn't affect either one of us because I wasn't really using any deep strikers and neither was Morpheus. And then the deployment was Sweeping Engagement, kind of like Diagonal Dawn of War. In terms of how we deployed our models, I put a huge amount in reserve because there wasn't enough places for me to hide all of my units out of line of sight blocking terrain. So I looked at the board, I guesstimated what I could hide and what I wanted to risk putting out. And then in the end, I had all 3 units of Kazakhstan in reserve, unit of Kashans of Strachan in reserve, and a unit of Cadians in reserve, and my 2 Cyclops demolition vehicles, which meant deployed on the board, I had 2 units of Cadians that were behind 1 ruin in my deployment zone. I had a unit of Cadians that weren't behind a ruin in my deployment zone, but were in cover and towards the top of it. And then I had my Creed command blob in a ruin, that's the big ruin in my deployment zone, and all of my artillery ground behind that as well. On the other side, Morpheus put his Storm Sword down on what is my right flank. He put his Demolishers and Eradicators on the left flank, up near the north. And then everything else essentially went in the middle. Oh, he also had a Vindicare, but it didn't really achieve anything this game. Typical Vindicare, it either missed or it failed to wound. It just was rolling like dog shit. We then roll off for turn 1. And I cannot express how important turn 1 was. Firstly, and fundamentally, this mission, Deploy Servo Skulls, really, really favors the person that goes first. Because you get to run forward and kick the ball, kick the objectives towards your opponent's deployment zone before they get a chance. And when it comes to their turn, all they can do is kind of like kick them back. But this means that you're able to, because you score the points at the end of the turn, not the beginning of the next turn, you can kick the ball forward and then score it. Not turn 1, because you can't score it turn 1. But when they kick it back, they can't score it. So to give you an example, turn 1, you run forward, you kick the objective, you don't score any points. They kick it back to the middle, they don't score any points, but then it comes back to you. You kick it forward, and this time you can score it. Then it goes over to their turn, the person that went second, and they kick it, and it goes back to the middle, and they don't score it. You see what I mean? So turn 1 is very, very important with Servo Skulls, but even more so in this matchup, turn 1 was insanely important because we both had a lot of artillery, and we both had a command blob, and we both didn't have enough CP to use reinforcements. So anything that died turn 1 wasn't coming back. We roll the dice. I roll first. I roll a big, fat, fucking 1. Oh, Emperor, why do you test me so? Fortunately, I was playing against another fellow guard player. So Morpheus rolls his dice and also rolls a 1. It was like that scene in the Albifusa, the text-to-speech, Caiaphas Cain, when he meets Marnius Calgar, and he's like, "You piece of shit too? Moon Kindred!" That's what it was like. We both looked at each other and went, "Lol, you never get first turn." He said, Morpheus like, "I never get first turn." I was like, "Ha, brilliant, we're going to be here all day," just like rolling off to see who doesn't get the first turn. I reroll the dice and I get a 4, which is respectable. It's not guaranteed, but better than a 1. And then Morpheus rolls and does the classic 1 into a 1. So for once, I did go first. Yes, Emperor, I never doubted you. Thank you so much. It's awesome. There we go. So I did get turn 1. And that was a very, very big deal. In all honesty, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but with this mission, with the list that went against each other, the game was essentially, it wasn't over turn 1, but it was like 90% in favor of the World War I guard. It was 90% in my favor because I get to do a lot of damage to him and I get to do very well on the mission. And what needed to happen was for me to have a bad turn. And unfortunately, I didn't. I do what I'm going to do, and I kick 2 objectives, one on the left, one on the right, into as far forward as I can towards the traitor guard lines. Don't score the points, but that's okay. And then I unload with my artillery. I hit the Supreme Command blob with 2 artillery pieces, which kills with the manticle on the battlecast, kills the guardsman. I'm rolling 5 and 6s on my number of shots, my artillery, which really just rubs salt in the wound. And then my other artillery wipes out another guard unit, the one that was with Creed. So, and also Creed goes down to like 2 wounds. So that's 2 units of infantry, which can't come back. That's all of the officers now exposed. And then the final artillery piece I throw into another guardsman squad, but I don't quite wipe it out, but I do manage to kill sort of one or 2 of them. It goes over to the traitor guard. Sorry, Morpheus, that's what you are now. It goes over to the traitor guard, and the storm sword is able to get. It's just in range of Leon, so it is able to take aim. The traitor gets take aim, and what happens is the storm sword comes out and doesn't quite destroy the Catachan blob. My dice have been very lucky for random shots. Morpheus' dice were unlucky. How many shots do the Storm Sword get? 1. How many shots do the Heavy Flamers on the Storm Sword get? 2, 1, and a 2. Now, how many shots does the Eradicator get? 1. Plus it's 6. How many shots does the Marcher get? 2. Or just constantly just 1s and 2s for random number of shots. And so when the dust settles, I haven't lost the Catachan unit on facing down the Storm Sword, which is brilliant because it means it's around to be able to do lots of objective control and get the points and everything. And I haven't lost the Cadians that are facing down the Demolisher and the Eradicator. And then in the artillery duel, I don't lose my Supreme Command blob. I'm able to get, because my blob's got take cover on it, I'm able to make a few saves between that and the Feel No Pain and whatnot. And so I lose about half of the blob, but not the entire thing. Goes over to my guard turn 2. I don't bring any reinforcements in. There's no need. I think I bring maybe the Cyclopses in, but to get... No, I don't bring any reinforcements in. I can't bring them in the deployment zone. So I just go, no reinforcements coming in. I'm just going to deal with what I've got right now. I think maybe one 20-man blob came in to support the now quite badly battered Catachans, but that was it. Pretty much everything else stays in reserve. In terms of my shooting, I use my artillery to wipe out basically the remaining infantry. One of those squads does come back. I also flatten 2 out of 3 of the armored sentinels, and that was really it. But now there's no... Oh, and I flatten the command squad with the Master Vox as well. So there is... And Creed dies as well. So by the end of my turn 2, there's no infantry left on the Traitor Guard side. The Sentinels have basically been made combat ineffective. And I've got enough objective... There's no way that the Storm Sword can get orders because Leontis is too far away from it because it's moved forward. And hitting on 4s, hitting on 3s, this thing didn't kill a unit with being a bit unlucky. Hitting on 4s, even if it rolls average, it now probably won't kill a unit. And also, I'm racking up secondary points, and I'm starting to get primary points as well. In fact, on turn 2, I get 15 primary because I've got one objective that's within 12 inches, one objective that's within 6 inches, one objective that's actually in the Traitor Guard deployment zone. The one that's in the deployment zone actually got there because of the guard blob that's facing down the tanks, because I kicked it forward and I still managed to control it, so Morpheus couldn't kick it back. Goes over to my... so that was my turn 2. it goes over to Traitor Guard turn 2, and it's essentially a similar situation. The tanks are now struggling to do any damage because they're hitting on 4s. There's no way that they can hit better than that. Leontus with the Praetor is able to do some good work, but again, just through some unlucky dice rolls, my command blob survives. The mortar survives, which means that the whole thing stays together. So I get an extra turn of being able to use my command blob, whereas Morpheus hasn't had his. And he's not, he hasn't had it, and I'm going to get rid of Leontus in my turn 3. So I take a whole bunch of casualties. I think a unit gets wiped out. The Cadians finally get wiped out. They come back with reinforcements. And the Catachans get wiped out as well. There were like 4 of them left. So I do lose a 20-man blob permanently. But the problem is that the firepower is really slackening off now. I really notice it. Morpheus rolls fairly average, but it's just hitting on 4s with guard. It just goes very swingy. It just doesn't hit that much. It might feel like it hits 50%. It might statistically hit 50% of the time, but it rarely actually does. Between all of like the barriers and the saves and whatnot, it just doesn't. So we go over to turn 3, and all of my reinforcements come in. I can come in where I like now. So I'm coming in on flank objectives and stuff. I'm coming in just everywhere that I need to be. And I'm also able to come in. I actually end up deploying a lot of actions in my deployment zone, but that's fine because I'm able to move and everything turn 4, and that's not an issue. So my turn 3 essentially consists of me dogpiling the middle objective with 40 guardsmen. The only thing that's facing off against them is literally 1 armored sentinel. And then I blast Leontus off the table. There's a bit of lucky 4-up saves going on here with the invulnerable save, but I do manage to blast him off. It does take like 2 or 3 artillery pieces, a bit of a chad. And I think that's realistically it. Blast off Leontus, and I think I damage the sentinel in the middle, but that's it. I don't wipe out. I damage it. Go over to Traitor Guard turn 3, and like I said, they can't control the objectives. Like some of them, the one that got kicked in the deployment zone does start getting kicked back now, but there's basically no primary coming in on that side. But I am taking a lot of damage, and the Demolishers now and Eradicators, now that they've sort of finished with the guard blob that had bum rushed them, the Demolisher actually starts coming around the flank and threatening my artillery. Turn 3, it does actually damage a Manticore quite badly, and the Eradicator starts slinging shells into the middle, and the Storm Sword slings some shells in the middle. Because there's a couple of units there, Concussive Wave starts going off and doing some good stuff. But I'm not really losing whole units. Like, I don't lose a whole unit in the center. Storm Sword is splitting its fire in many directions to try and do as much damage to as many units as possible, whittle me down, trying to make the objective control thing go in its favor because it's OC 8, but it's just not really working. I have completely lost control of the top left, but that's fine. I'm dominating the middle, and I'm dominating on the right side just through pure numbers. I'm not killing this Storm Sword, but it can't out OC me, unfortunately. So we get to turn 4, and the Traitor Guard turn 4, the reinforcement guardsmen came in, and they do a lot of damage, like I said, but they're not really wiping anything out. They're scoring final secondaries, but there's no primary going towards them. Goes over to my turn 4, and my turn 4 and 5, I literally don't shoot anything. I don't do it. I refuse to do. Oh, the one thing that happens is Strachan goes in there and kills the armor sentinel. I think that was it. That happens like turn 4, turn 5. But that was literally it, because I don't want to actually kill anything. I just want to take all of the points. And so my turn 4 and 5 consist of me just pushing bodies onto objectives and just massively controlling them. And so by the end of turn 5, there are 2 objectives that are actually basically in the Traitor Guard deployment zone. But to be fair, Morpheus does, the one that was in the top left, he does kick that back over a couple of turns and manage to kick it back into sort of towards my deployment zone. So that's good. So there are some points. He does get some primary over the course of sort of turn 4, turn 5. But, and by the time we get to their turn 5, I don't have a huge amount of stuff left. But I have essentially lost about 80% of my army. But I've won on points. And the Demolisher tank, continued to harass and destroy my artillery part. By the end of it, it has actually taken out 3 artillery pieces. But that's fine. Because I'm not really doing any damage. I'm not really aiming to do any damage at this point. I'm happily just throwing bodies, wave after wave, onto objectives, getting those primary, constantly kicking them further and further into the guard, traitor guard lines. And whilst I do take a load of casualties, that's fine. I do okay on secondaries as well. And so we get to the end of turn number 5 and the end of the game. And it ends up being a 77 victory point to the World War I Guard and 57 victory points to the Traitor Guard, leading to a totally normal, not a massive victory, not a big defeat or anything like that, just a totally normal victory for the World War I Guard army. I think the big takeaway for me from that game is Servo Skulls is a bit of a dodgy mission. Having the first strike in the artillery duel was massive, and most importantly, it showed how tactically flexible the army was, because up until this point it had done very well against armies that it should do well against, fast assault armies that run at it and then they just blast them. This was an army that wasn't going to come at me, I was going to have to come at them, and I wasn't going to be able to win the firefight. So what I liked about this game was it showed that this list is flexible. It can shoot people to death if it needs to, but it doesn't need to kill things to win games. But with all of that said, even though the game was probably from the beginning heavily in my favor, I still had an amazing game, and there was a lot of fun had by both sides. Morpheus had a blast. He got to feel the true power of the Storm Sword, especially in those last turns when it really was picking up its damage, just getting a bit more lucky on those dice rolls. And I obviously had fun because I managed to score lots of points and flex that tactical brain. I was able to think hard enough that a single wrinkle formed on what would otherwise be a perfectly smooth surface of my grey matter. But we get to the end of the tournament, and I've managed to come away with 2 victories and 1 draw, which puts me in a very comfortable position, and I actually end up podiuming. I come 3rd behind a Death Guard, who came 2nd, and behind Eldar, who came 1st. So getting to podium with Guard, that's a pretty good result, and I'm very, very happy with that. I'm pretty pleased with how it all went. In terms of final thoughts and lessons, I really had my eyes open to the power of massed artillery. It's something that at the beginning of 10th, I hadn't quite had enough artillery together to do it. Getting to do it now, even in its nerf state, it feels good. Is it broken? Is it overpowered? I don't think so. I have to spend a lot of points to get that amount of artillery. I have to spend a lot of points getting all the infantry that is needed to allow that artillery to do its job. If I had less infantry, I would have and put some tanks in there. I wouldn't be able to get enough tanks that to mean anything. If I drop the Kazakin and maybe a couple of blobs, I'm not going to have, that's only 80 infantry, and I'm only going to get 3 Lehman Russes? Not enough. 3 Lehman Russes is not enough. You'll lose 2 in a turn. Easy peasy. So you can't, I can't get mass artillery and mass infantry and mass tanks. So of course, if I'm spending that much points on my artillery, it's like 700, 800 points on my artillery, it needs to be doing damage. And I felt like it did the appropriate amount of damage for the amount of points that I invested in it. That's not me being biased. It's not me praying that GW doesn't somehow watch this video and nerf it into the ground. No, it feels okay. I do have to mass my artillery up. If I want to do any damage, I have to basically put 3 or 4 pieces into one big tough unit to really get the job done. And there's a lot of units out there 4 wounds now, so even the flat damage of the Manticore isn't great. It's all right. But overall, comparing the Baz and the Manticore, I felt like the Manticore was good, but there were a few times when it needed a CP reroll to get the number of shots that I needed it. The Basilisk, over the course of 3 games, every game, each one basically fired 5 times. And that meant it fired 45 times. The Basilisk fired 45 times over the course of the tournament. Not once did I need to put a CP reroll into them. They didn't do a huge amount of damage, but they were just so damn reliable. Really, really solid artillery piece. And I love the Manticore. I think it's a great piece. But I am now Team Basilisk. Firmly entrenched. What would I do to change this list? Interestingly, I don't know exactly how I'd mix it up. The one option that I would consider is maybe dropping the Kazakin for something else. The Kazakin were really, really good. But just if I wanted to go all in on the artillery, I might swap them out for some more arty. I might swap the Manticores. 2 Manticores is 300 points. I could potentially get like 2 field ordnance batteries and some mortars. But then I would have to spend some points on orders to make them do something. So there's something there. Or swap the Kazakin out and the Manticores and go for more orders and more line infantry. There's a lot of potential there. Or don't move the Kazakin. The Kazakin were very, very good, and just swap the Manticores out. In terms of the line infantry, they did fine. It was very interesting not having Feel No Pains of the infantry. Just felt old school. It felt like going back to not to 8th and 9th edition. It felt like going back to sort of 5th edition, where what makes the Guard Blob Jawball is just the amount of bodies in it. No Feel No Pain, there's no fancy rules, it's just the amount of bodies. And so that it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I really thought that not having Feel No Pain and stuff in there would be a problem. And it has kind of opened my eyes to having, rather than having officers in every unit, having 1 or 2 very big command units which can sit at the back and order everyone else. There's definitely some play there for sure, but I really enjoyed using something a bit different. I still think Krieg are the best option, but I think you can get other options either through pure numbers or through different ways of support to match the Krieg. Yeah, I think overall the list worked very well, and I'm kind of struggling to think how I would change it. I would maybe play around with the artillery side of things, maybe play around with the Kazakin side of things, but if I made no changes again, I just ran that list, I'd be pretty happy with it. I could take that into any tournament and be pretty confident that I don't know if I'd win every game, got to try out against the Necrons, against Space Marine Armor and stuff like that, but I'd be confident taking that list into a local RTT or a GT and coming out with a positive win-loss, for sure. At least that's what I think, but of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. What would you change about this list, and how would you adapt it to get every last point of efficiency out of it? Also, let me know what other kind of guard armies you want me to field at tournaments. Like I said, I've got a Deathcore Krieg one rocking around, but I've also got some non-guard armies. Would you like to see pure Swarm Tyranids? I now am the proud owner of easily 120 Hormiguns, and again the same amount in Termagants, so I can go pure Endless Swarm. We've had Infantry Guard. What about Infantry Nids? I've also got my Black Tide. I've also got my Genestealer Cult. I've also got my my Tau. I've got my Scions, all sorts of stuff. So let me know what guard armies you want to see in action. And finally, don't forget, if you enjoy this video, to like it. It does make a really big difference. Usually boosts it with the YouTube algorithm. So it is a very big deal liking the video. So thank you to everyone that does go ahead and do that. And don't forget, if you want to see more After Action reports, subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure, and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian Glory Hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, and they have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a big shout out to Bon Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Marcus Roberts, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Varney. Thank you guys so much. Your incredible generosity is a massive part of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time, and it is a big driving force behind the channel. But I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.